COSATU is calling on SARS to conduct lifestyle audits on politicians, senior managers and individuals with high net worth. The federation says South Africa is fast becoming a haven for questionable characters with unexplained wealth. That's after the country was grey-listed by the Financial Action Task Force. COSATU says workers will bear the brunt of the decision. At the same time, the South African Reserve Bank has reaffirmed its commitment to fighting money laundering and terrorism financing. Last year, the Financial Action Task Force announced that South Africa needed more prosecutions and the freezing of more assets to demonstrate its compliance. During the COVID-19 pandemic, the task force did not put immediate deadlines but advised the Reserve Bank to report progress on a voluntary basis. In September last year, S&P Global Rating warned that being on the grey list would impact the likes of Eskom and Transnet due to their reliance on offshore debt capital markets for funding. Now, the chairperson of the ANC's Economic Transformation Subcommittee is Mmamoloko Kubayi, and she joins us for some reaction from the governing party. Thank you so much for making time, Minister. As the ANC, how are you reacting to this decision yesterday?
Afternoon, Clement. Afternoon to your viewers. As the ANC, we have issued a statement, definitely noting the outcome. Firstly, we welcome the assurance by government. I think, as you just said, the statement by the Reserve Bank, the statement by the Minister of Finance, indicating the commitment on the implementation of the action plan that should be dealt with. I think one of the issues, moving away from 130 issues that have been raised as concerns to what we see as 8 major issues that needs to finally be concluded, we do believe that the commitment that has been shown is what we'll be able to get out of here. Obviously, the concern is that we shouldn't be here in the first place because it does limit our ability in terms of investment, and that's why those statements are very important in terms of reassuring the international community around our important interest in ensuring as a country that we get out of here. And again, Clement would note that over time there was concern around the weakening of the state, especially in the security cluster, law enforcement agencies. That would be one of the things that would have been something that FATF would have been concerned about. And that's why the work that has been done by government in terms of strengthening again those law enforcement agencies, but also the commitment by the Minister of Finance during budget around allocation of more finance or more budget into that security cluster gives more confidence that we'll be able to get out of the situation. Yeah.
Have you spoken as the head of the Economic Transformation Subcommittee to your colleagues in government, so the deployees in government that are dealing with this issue? The finance minister did warn this week when he was presenting that budget that we must prepare for the possibility of being grey-listed. Has he outlined to you as the party what this decision means for South Africa?
No, obviously, as the chair, I am aware. We're going to have our first meeting on Monday. We'll outline our program of action as the subcommittee. Definitely, as ANC, that's why we could issue the statement, because from our side, and the SG is aware of what is going to be done and the program of action, and we've given feedback. That's why we can comfortably say on the action list that are being highlighted. For example, Clement, part of the issues, for example, that are being raised is the funding of NGOs, that sometimes the money ends up in what could be terrorist organizations. So that needs to be looked into. There were issues from last year that needed to be strengthened in terms of legislation, and those legislations were ascended to by last year by the president. Others were parliament cooperated, and Minister of Finance reported to say they've been able to put those implementation in place. So again, you look at the recommitment by Minister of Finance and the Reserve Bank, but also what will be important as showcasing the ability of your NPA, SIU, all those law enforcement agencies to act. That's what it's going to be. The issue that, again, that has been raised is around cash movement. that, again, we said when Minister of Finance said they will be looking into it, they've agreed that there is a need to look into those areas. Organizations that are running businesses, for example, using cash, are coming across as a bit of concern, especially with these issues around funding international organizations that are terrorist organization or monies that could be suspected in there. But again, the issue, one of the things that was picked up around PEP, which is publicly exposed individuals, in terms of the areas, and maybe that's why you could list what COSATU is recommending. It's those things that are already in the action list, which government has committed. So what we need to see, and from the ANC point of view, is monitor the implementation. And what we have said as well, we said quarterly will also look at how we best get the report so that we don't wait at the end of the time where the assessment again is coming and we are shocked that things have not been done.
Yeah, and it's going to take more than a commitment, Minister, and I'm sure you understand that, because I feel South Africa didn't do enough to avoid this outcome. There are people who argue that we acted a little too late. Do you agree with that? Because yes, there was some legislation that was introduced, but the process runs in two ways, right? There's the legal framework, and then there's the substantive changes. So even when you introduce draft legislation amendments, you also need those laws to be implemented and enforced. That's what that task force cares about.
No, look, Clement, I don't think we acted too late. Let's take a step back and understand that while we were dealing with the issue of regularly reporting to FATF, would have been the issue that comes to the fore. Many of us would have seen the state capture. We might have had a sense that certain things are happening wrongly, but to that, what extent is what the State Capture Commission brought to the fore. And if you look at the timing of the report and the timing of the submission of the implementation, one can easily conclude that part of what members of FATF would have looked into is to say, have we done enough to implement, which definitely because of the time the report came out would not have been. Strengthening of institutions, definitely we started doing that work. So it's not an easy thing, Clement, to say you can implement all of the things, because what FATF needs, they don't want you to go and get 90% or 99%. They want 100%. If they've listed 130 issues, all 130 issues must be clear, not partially, 100% clean. So that's where the issue is, because if you look at the 8 areas as well, you find that some of them, not that they have not been done, they are partially done. And what FATF wants is 100%. Hence, I'm saying I'm confident that at the rate that we have started working, or that we see the report as this country, in terms of submitting that report, we can safely say that they were not negligent. I mean, if you read at the report and their website, you go to FATF, they even tell you about the level of the delegation South Africa sent. When I was doing my own research as well, going through, I saw one of their comments is to say the delegation South Africa, it showed that we were serious as a country. And I don't think we can falter the Minister of Finance or the team that he had put together to respond, that it was late. I think they have done their best. We need to give them the support going forward as well.
But I don't think you needed to wait for the state capture report, Minister, to implement or even pass through laws that are against money laundering and that combat terrorism. I mean, when I look at the 2 key pieces of legislation that went through Parliament late last year, those are 2 pieces of legislation you would have, in fact, passed through 3 years ago, 5 years ago. I don't think you needed to wait for the state capture report to tell you what we already knew.
No, but Clement, not that there was a vacuum of legislation. There was legislation that was dealing with money laundering. What was needed was the amendments that needed to come through. Yeah. And those were informed by feedback that we received from FATF. So I think that's how we need to understand it, that these laws existed. But as we were submitting as a country the reports, from the report that we are getting from the team that went, is that as we are submitting these reports based on the request, that we are going to evaluate you in February. By this time, these are our concerns. For example, you need to strengthen your law or legislative environment around money laundering. These are the areas that you need to strengthen. And that's what would have informed the amendments on the laws.
Yeah.
Because these laws, most of them were not new, were amendments. That's why they could pass through Parliament in the manner that they passed.
Yes, and I think that's fair, Minister. How are you, as the ANC government, going to be reassuring investors? Because no investor wants to risk bringing their money into a grey-listed country. I mean, investment is not going to stop, but you are going to have investors that are going to pause before they decide, let me take my money there. So what's the plan to, because there's the work you've got to do, right, with the task force, reassuring them that you are fixing the weaknesses and the loopholes in our legislation, and they have directed us to do certain things, and government, I imagine, will focus on that. But in the meantime, while that process unfolds, what's the plan to say to the investors, it's still safe to come here, it's still an investor destination?
There are several things, Clement. Firstly, I think the statements issued by Minister of Finance, the statement issued by the Reserve Bank, statement issued by ANC, all of them are reaffirming the commitment in this country holistically. Number two would be engagement that would have been to be led by Minister of Finance with various investors. I do, as a chair of ETC, get requests from investors in terms of the perspective from ANC, which we do engage and give assurances where we need to. We'll continue to do that with those who are approaching us and those that will take initiatives to approach and give this assurance. And that's why the message that we're saying from the ruling party is that we will hold our employees accountable. We will do quarterly monitoring. We're not wanting to wait until the time another review comes. We'll do quarterly monitoring to check progress and be able to see where there are gaps in terms of policy and in terms of law, so that if they still exist, then we'll be able to do the work that we need. As I said, we'll continue. We're starting our work. As you know, we've just been recently reconstituted as a committee. From Monday we start, and we'll definitely engage with our employees so that we can ensure that the country gets out of the environment where it is.
All right. Mmamoloko Kubayi, thank you for making time. That's the ANC's Economic Transformation Subcommittee Chair.